Hi everybody, I'm Scarlett Arts and I still think it's amazing to talk with Rick Mooney, to listen to Rick Mooney. Rick is going to talk about your, number one request, bowing this moment. Hi Rick.
Hello, and let me greet you once again. It's so nice to see everybody come for this. I thank you for attending. I thank you for inviting me, and I'm going to say this again. I thank Scarlett for making this happen and for making the recordings and for getting it out there on the web so that people can have it for the future. We have, Scarlett and I talked a little bit just before this. This is going to be the last meeting for this year. Anyway, maybe the last meeting of all. Excuse me. This will wrap up the series of things that I have prepared to talk about. The things, as you know, that I was trying to do, besides presenting my books and giving people insight into what was going on in my mind and how to present them, what I liked to do was to show people activities that they can use in their teaching and in their own playing to help them acquire the physical skills necessary to be successful on the instrument. So we did not talk about pieces or repertoire because these things we discussed would apply to any of that. And the only thing, we've been doing so much left hand that I wanted to talk a little bit about the bow hand and a little bit about the bow strokes, and that's today. Now, beyond that, I don't have any organized, planned seminar to deliver. And so this may be it. If any of you have specific topics or questions or items that you would like to meet and talk about together, why don't you please be in touch with Scarlett about that? And she can be the gathering place of ideas. And then if it seems like there's some stuff to talk about, she and I can get together and make a plan, and we'll let you know. But basically, this is it for 2021, and I think we've gotten a lot accomplished. I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. It just has to be said. I know that not everybody in this group is a teacher. But because of my background and the way I approach things, I always present things to people as a teacher, as if they were teachers, okay? So there may be some things in here that don't specifically apply to you, but I think much of the material will be valuable to you. And even if you're not a teacher, these items we're going to discuss are things you can pursue on your own for yourself, and it ought to still be valuable. So let me go ahead and start talking about a couple of things. I don't think I left any of the preliminaries out. If I remember something, I'll break in and talk. Oh, there's one thing about questions. When I am talking, I don't look at the chat, and I don't see everyone. So even if someone waves their hand with a question, I don't necessarily see it. So there are two things that we can do. One is, if you have a question about a specific thing we're doing right now, unmute your sound and speak up and ask your question, and we'll deal with it. Two, I will try, three ways. Two, if you have a question you want to chat off to Scarlett, she can gather those questions and she can be the person to channel those inquiries through. And the third thing is, once again, at the end, I hope we will have a few minutes where if there are overall or leftover questions, we can talk at the end. All right? Okay, now, I said this last time, but I'll repeat it now as an introduction to this. The left hand, of course, on the cello, on an instrument, is extremely important because you have to be able to find the notes, and you have to be able to find them accurately and consistently, and you have to be able to see it, recognize it, process it, and make it happen. It has to be fluent, and we have to have that kind of skill. But in the end, when it comes to being expressive and when it comes to making music, it's really the bow. It's really the bow that does the work. So and as I mentioned with the Book 10 posture discussion we had, one of the things that I feel very strongly about is to get started with the correct habits right from the very most beginning students, and grow from there. So I said then, when I am teaching in Book 1, and I tell this to my students, when I am teaching in Book 1, I'm really teaching with Book 10 in my mind, because I know it's out there. And I tell the students that I know I get real picky, and you maybe not understand exactly why or what's going on, but you got to trust me on this. I know what's happening in your future. It's like a fortune teller, you know. I know what's happening in your future, and I'm getting you set up to be successful for that. So this begins with the bow hold. And it's one of those things that is problematic. There are a lot of people with bow holds that are difficult. They find that their hands are tight, or they find that their positioning is not exactly correct. So we have to think about the bow hold. A teaching thing. Some of you may not need this, but this is one of the most valuable things that I ever acquired. It's called a twinkle bow. Okay? The point being, a student can hold this bow, and there is virtually no weight to support out here. The problem with a long bow at the beginning is that when you go to put it on the string, suddenly this becomes very heavy and this feels tight as you try to support the tip. And it's so nice. Remember, I keep saying we need to give the students activities that provide them with the actual feeling of what they need to have to relate it off to the new steps in the future. This feeling of a really soft bow hold can be acquired with this little tiny twinkle bow. I did go and find one photograph just for whatever it's worth. I'm going to hold this up and I hope you'll be able to see it. There is a bow hold of one of my 5-year-olds. Okay? And that's because we started with the twinkle bow. But relatively quickly, when I start the bow hold, I put thumb with second finger in this way. This way. I actually, for the little children, put an X on their thumb and an X on the first crease of their second finger, and ask them to hide the X's, which again allows them to do it without a lot of explanation. And we practice holding that and hiding the X's. There's the center of it. Then I call this finger, this one, Long John Silver, like the famous pirate in Treasure Island, okay? He's Long John Silver because he's the longest finger you have, and he's going to touch the silver part on the bow. So there again, it's an idea that the kids can do at home. So basically, when I'm doing this, I'll get them to put their thumb and their Long John Silver in the right spot. I'll get them to put first finger also on its first crease, and then they'll let these guys fall where they fall naturally. I'm always starting with the bow up in the air at first. It's less important with the twinkle bow, but it's terribly important with a long bow. Start this way, where there's no weight to support, and learn the feeling of a soft bow hand. Let me talk a little bit. This may apply to some of you, but it certainly applies to teachers. You do have to be careful when you buy students for, instruments and bows for your students, that you do not get bows that are too long. I have, sometimes when they put kits together, where the cello and the bow and the case and everything all comes all together, sometimes those bows are very, very long. And the longer the bow, the harder it is to control. A bow should go like this. You put your, this part, not the screw part, but this part of the frog on the bridge, and you lay it down, and it'll be just as long as the fingerboard. And it's amazing how that works. And it should work on every size instrument. And if you got a kid with a half-size cello with a bow that goes this far, it's too long. Another, though they're getting much better at carbon fiber bows these days, they used to use fiberglass bows. Fiberglass bows were very heavy and clunky at the tip. And the heavier the weight at the tip, the harder it is to control. Okay, now, next issue, very important issue, which is going to permeate everything we talk about. Remember this business that we talked about with the book 10 posture about using the big muscles in the back. All the power for the sound is going to come from your back. You're going to sink. You're not going to press, right? And so this connection from the back to the cello is one of the things we need to acquire, which is why the flexibility in the motion games we played at the other session. If you, okay, the thing is that I use images, and I may have used this one, and I forget. I have two images. One of them works real well, and I use it all the time. That's the hose, okay? You've got the water back here, you turn the water on, and this is the end of the hose. It needs to come out at the end of the hose, and if you put a kink in the hose, the water does not flow. And if the water does not flow, you get no sound, okay? So that's one image to think about, all the way from the back, all the way to the string. Another image for the bow arm is a car. And a lot of times there's one part in here that nobody gets anymore because everybody's got automatic transmission, okay? But the way I put it is, here are the 4 tires, okay? These tires, if you wish to control your car, all 4 of them better be touching the road, okay? Here are your shock absorbers. They need to be flexible. You know what happens when you drive a car with tight shocks or a truck and you feel every bounce? You also maybe know what happens with a car with bad shocks where it wobbles in this fashion. It's a combination of firmness and flexibility that we have to acquire in here. Now the steering is right there, right past the wrist. This is the direction. This helps us with the direction of the bow, the steering. And if your arm and everything is flexible, it will move in a natural fashion. Maybe I'll say one more thing about that in a sec. This is the clutch. If you disengage the clutch, the power from the engine never makes it out to the wheels. Okay? You have to engage the clutch so that the power from your motor, which is the back, that's your power, flows down through the steering, through the shock absorbers into the wheels, and you have control of your sound. The one thing that I'd like to point out, which is really, really hard, well, yeah, and then I must say one other thing, I got to try and remember, is the idea that how do we hold the bow without squeezing with the thumb? And the idea that the very same weight that we talk about for making a sound can give you the power to hang on with your finger pads on the side of the bow. And that power, that weight can be very, very strong. And then you put your thumb lightly on the other side, and it's not squeezing against the thumb. One of the things I'll refer back to is the Long John Silver. Two things happen typically when people are squeezing with their thumb. One is their thumb will poke through the bow this way. If they're squeezing, it'll squirt through. Another is the fingers will creep up the stick in this way. As the thumb pushes back, the other fingers push up. And this, of course, your hand is off balance besides being tight, and it doesn't work. So those are two items that you can notice in your own playing too. If you find that your thumb and your Long John Silver are not staying together, first thing you should check is whether or not you're squeezing. Okay? Now, this is an exercise that you can do. You can put your bow like this, out with the hair facing me. Feel for a second the power and the weight in your back moving freely, and plop those fingers down. And I don't care if they're in a perfect bow hold position or not right now, but plop them down there and feel that weight. Feel that weight. Remember, Margaret Rowell talked a lot about suction and the idea that if you have octopus fingers, they will get stuck on the side of the bow and stay there, even though your thumb isn't even touching. They won't move. You can wiggle it around and they don't move. And it's the weight that provides us with the suction so that the bow finger pads cling to the side of the bow. Then, as I said, I put it up and touch lightly with my thumb, and you can wiggle the bow and you can make sure your knuckles are jiggly when you're doing this. Okay? All right. Now, all of those I'm going to say this in this way and now. I am going to be talking about Suzuki Repertoire now and the Suzuki sequence in order to trace through how I approach these bow strokes. I would like to repeat that you don't have to be doing the Suzuki system. I don't care what repertoire you use. But if you need to refer to the things I say and the pieces I refer to, they're in order from the Suzuki book. And then if you want to use different repertoire, that's fine. Just kind of prioritize it and orient it and organize it in a similar fashion. Remember that we're trying to go step by step by step by step and not do the sink or swim method. All right? Now, that means I'm going to get the twinkle bow for a sec. Okay. I need to mention this item. I have been told more than once, and I don't know how to fix it. Frankly, folks, I don't know how to fix it. When I speak, I believe the volume and everything is fine. When I play, it seems that I overload the speaker and the sound does not come through. And I've been asked to play more quietly, which I will try to do. The problem with that is there are at least 2 times in this when I would want to try to demonstrate a sound, you know, a real sound. And to try and tell you that is one thing, and then to present a light, surfacey example, I don't know how to solve the problem. So you may have to put up with a little overload on the sound a couple times, and every place else I'll try to but play back so it doesn't break up. Okay, so the very first thing we do with the kids in Suzuki is little bows and staccato. That's our first topic, staccato. We put it down. Here's a little preview exercise that you can do for yourself too. If you're trying to be sure you're flexible and loose, bounce your bow a little bit on your knee here. Bounce, 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 and plop on the string. You can do the bird wing thing where we feel, we did that with the left hand. Do the bird wing thing where you feel the flexibility in here and how the weight balances on that spot, and you sink. I want to keep saying, I say words like that. I don't say press. I try even not to say dig in. I try to stay away from tight, aggressive sounding words. I want to use soft words like sink. And the very first thing we do with the little kids is staccato, like this. Okay, now, for the most beginning, I don't care if they move right from here. There's a whole thing we're going to do with this in the future as we develop, okay? But here we are, down deep, staccato. Notice again, it's a relatively elementary staccato sound. Go deep and start and stop with precision without changing the weight of the bow. Stay deep and start and stop with precision. You guys can do this with me. Good, so let's do this once. 1, 2, 3, plop. Bird wing, feel the deep contact here, and we're going to go staccatos without changing the depth of the weight. Go. All right, now I'm going to tell this story now because it applies to lots of places, but I'll tell it right at the beginning. I had the pleasure of listening to Heinrich Schiff give a master class once. And he was dealing with young adults, university level students who played some really, really amazing repertoire, and they played very well. They were doing Boccherini A major, and I think one of them did a concerto, and I can't remember what else, but it was high level repertoire. He spent the entire masterclass talking about making sound. You have to get down in the string and make sound. If you then, he says, then you have something to shape. And if you start doing this at the top, it all starts to sound poofy and affected, you know? But he was just down into it and stay down and make a sound. And that was, well, first of all, it reinforced what I was doing. It was funny. One of my students was there watching too. And I went up to the mom and said, how'd you like it? And she said, well, he sounds just like you. And so I felt good about that. So we're in, when we do staccato with a longer bow, by the way, I stay at the balance point. We all know we're going to play short out here too, but right now at the balance point. And that's because, for 2 reasons. One is because that's where the weight balances the most easily, and the other, it's where the bow is the most sort of responsive for the future things we're going to do. So again, if I do this, 1, 2, 3, and plop it down near the balance point, here's my example. I'm going to play deep, and I hope it might overload. Listen. Your turn, go. Right. So now, this is another thing. Suzuki invented a word called tonalization. And he used that word based on a singer's word vocalization. You've all been in situations where you've heard singers warming up, going up scales and arpeggios and whatnot, and they're loosening up their muscles. They're getting relaxed and resonant, right? They're not singing a song. They're working on their sound. And he said, string players ought to do the same thing every day. Start with tonalization, so I may refer to that term again. The next part of that, though, is this business of you don't learn how to do this. I'll play a little softer this time. You don't learn how to do that while you're concentrating on playing a piece. Okay? You learn how to do that on open D. And when you learn how to do it on open D, some of these topics, some of these techniques I'm going to show you, well, they will apply very nicely to scales, the next, where you get a chance to repeat it correctly over and over again in a context where the notes are relatively straightforward, there's no fancy rhythms and no complicated string crossings, and you can apply that as the next step. And once you've got that sort of acquired, well, then you start applying it into a more difficult situation. The idea being that the basic technique does not change over time. What changes over time is the complexity of the material that you are playing. You can learn just as much on open D as you can with a big piece. But once you know it on open D, you don't have to worry about it when you get to the big piece. All right. Now, this is all I'm going to talk about with the Twinkle Variation. It is the first thing the kids see. Again, for little kids, little motions, little full arm things with the weight down deep. Again, I keep saying little kids, you guys can practice that too. Almost everybody that I do teacher training with in the Suzuki system, and it's true as well for me, but they have come back to me and said, after studying in this way, my sound got better. Okay? So even though I'm saying students a lot or kids a lot, you're going to find that if you'll do some of these things on your own, your sound will improve as well. All right. So one of the variations of the twinkle is this one. Just want to do a line of that with me? Let's try it. Let's do this warm up. 2, 3, 1. Bird wing, contact, deep contact. Ready, go. So I want to repeat, you don't have to do the twinkle variations. There are plenty of other very basic pieces that you can use with staccato, but this is where we start. In the Suzuki sequence, the next one that really concentrates on staccato is Song of the Wind. You should know that a new version of the books are coming out sometime, I hope soon. They've been in the work for years. One of the things missing in the current books, if you use the Suzuki books for yourself or for your students, they're missing staccato dots. That's going to get fixed. Song of the Wind is going to have staccato on every 8th note. So let's do that much of that piece. So you can get set, do the preparation, do the syncing. Ready, go. so on, right? The thing I like about the organization of the book one, there are many things, but one of them is you start with staccato, then you get a legato, and then you get a staccato, you go back and forth and have variety, and you get to everything ultimately. After that is perpetual motion. Perpetual motion also will have staccato dots in the new book. It says in the current book, make a stop after every note. Well, cool, that's fine, but there is a symbol for it, and the kid should learn the symbol, and it's a dot. And there will be a staccato dot on these notes. The thing that's nice about perpetual motion is it gives us a lot of repetition on the point. And that, again, the idea that I keep talking about with the left hand applies here as well. You need to give these kids the opportunity to do things correctly many, many times and develop it as an automatic habit. So if you know perpetual motion, let's play the first line of it, okay? Here we go, ready, go. You will notice that I'm still down deep, staying there, starting and stopping with precision. Etude. Etude is next. After that, the thing about etude is you get to do this with string crossings. Therefore, now your bow armor's got to be aware of crossing over the string and changing balance. And at this point in time, I'm moving the entire arm from string to string to string. We all know very well in the future we'll do string crossings with stuff like this. That's down the road. Okay, right now, I want to be able to go like this. Set the weight. Set the weight. Okay, so if you know it, let's play the first line of etude. And we don't have to make those stops, but please be aware of that moment where you cross strings and shift the entire balance from your back to the new string. Here we go, ready, go. And so on. So I'm going to say this one more time because I'm going to start to branch here. Up until this point in time, I am, as you have observed, I hope, I am playing with very deep, very calm motions. It's just get down in there and stay down in there and start and stop with precision. That I want to refer back to Heinrich Schiff. To me, I believe that's really, really a way for people to learn what the sound's supposed to be. And so there's that aspect of it. Just down deep and get in the tone. Now, we do need a refinement. There's nothing wrong with this, and we can play like this anytime we want, but there is a refinement that can start happening in book 2. In long, long ago, variation, which is what I was taught was called set and release staccato. Goes like this. If you can see what I'm doing, I'll explain it in a minute. One of my friends says that's like plucking with the bow, which is a very good image because plucking, you pull and let the string go and let it ring. You pull and let the string go. Another one calls it bow pops. And that's the one that I have adopted to give to my students. The idea that you get your weight set and then you let the bow pop, okay? So in other words, get the secret, the huge key to this is to put your weight in the string before you play the note and then release it at the moment you draw the bow. This, I believe, is why people have trouble with this technique because it's opposite of what they've been taught before. Before you get down in and then you play. Now we're saying you get down in and you play when you come out. And the timing becomes the issue. So we're going to go like this. We're going to go set and pop. And now a little up bow motion, set the weight and kind of tug in that direction and let the bow go. Just let it go. Set, pop, set, set. It's a very, very important moment, okay? I want to repeat, timing. Set, release, set, pop, whatever words you choose to use, whatever makes sense to you. I'm overdoing the size a little bit, but you can see set, pop. All right. Play, if you know this long ago variation, you can play with me. We'll play, we won't play the whole thing. So we're down on the G string, get settled, get deep, and we'll work on the timing. Ready? Go. Set. Pop. Pop. Okay. One of the things that you'll notice, I've said this before, that one of the reasons that I feel like I can get by without doing a lot of etudes is I believe the technique is actually in the pieces. If we pull it out and teach it, if we preview it so the students can do it in advance of actually starting the piece, and if they can do that in a piece, they learn the technique they need to learn, and then they got a piece at the end of it all. Okay. The next momentous occasion. Oh no, not quite. There is one along the way, Gasa Gavad at the end of book 2, and let me just show it to you. We don't have to play it, but Gasa Gavad has got bow pops all through it, if you ask me. I'm going a little slowly again to show you the timing and let you hear the quality of sound. When I do this, there ought to be a ring afterwards, okay? So we're really talking about articulation here, aren't we? Getting a little bite at the beginning, but then allowing it to release so that you get the ring after. All right, here comes the momentous occasion, is the trio for Minuet and G by Beethoven. Set, pop, set, pop, set, pop, set, pop. So this is, why don't we do this G? You guys can do this one with me. Set, pop, set, pop, set, pop. Okay? Set, pop, set, pop, set, pop. And then we can do it with a more of a tempo, more of a rhythm. Ready? Go. 1, 2, 3. 1, set. Set. And I do tell my students that one of the key ingredients here, this business of getting set is still there, but get set for the first one. If you got the timing down for the first one, it helps make the timing work for the next ones. So this moment of set is the important one. Down, set. Down, set. So how is the sound coming across for you? Are you hearing the pop and the ring? Good, good, good. I'm hoping that none of this is so loud that you're losing the example. The pop and the ring, though, that's so key. Now, I'm just gonna progress out now without saying many more words. Here's our Uppost Staccato. So you see, we'll start with that basic down in the string, stay there, staccato. We'll add the bow pops to it. we'll add the same bow direction to it, and suddenly you've got this, right? Right? When you get there. So Allegro Passionato goes what? Right? All those long Uppost Staccato things, and it's in the Haydn Concerto, it's in the Rococo Variations, it's all over the place. And we can start that pre-twinkle. All right, so there's one branch from our staccato, which we can keep and use as appropriate. We can modify it a little with the pops, the set and release, and that becomes in its own turn Uppost Staccato. Now there's another thing that starts to branch from that basic staccato, and that is spiccato. Okay, this is how I teach the spiccato. I start again with this. It has been said by many people, this not, I believe, I've said this before, I believe that virtually none of what I'm telling you is exclusively Suzuki material or concept. It is the concept that has been going on for hundreds of years on the instrument, just brought to a level that children, younger people can deal with, and put in an order that even assists older people to take things in a sequence, right? It is said, and I believe this, that even an off the string bowing begins with an on the string feel. If you don't have a deep on the string feel in your body, you're going to be up on the surface all the time. You have to be down in. So here's the first step. It's a bounce. And it's got to be, there are several things to say about this. Number one, this really does have to happen somewhere in here between the balance point and the middle. The bow will respond at this place. Two, it's got to have a soft hand because you want the bow to bounce back. It's like bouncing a ball. You let it drop and it bounces back all by itself. You just have to control the way in which you drop it. If you drop it in a way, it will come back in a predictable fashion. And that's what happens here, is that you have a drop and the bow will bounce by itself. It's why the French bow became so amazing with this bend in the stick, is because suddenly it was springy. This is wrong. Please don't let your people do this. Let this become like a window washer kind of motion. The bow stick needs to stay flat and parallel to the floor. Okay? Then, when we've got that bounce working softly but evenly, then we'll add a back and forth to it like this. Okay? So here's my physics again. You got two force vectors. One of the force vectors goes this way, and one of the force vectors goes this way. You combine the two, and you get this. Okay? And at the bottom of it, you need to be in the string. Hence, starting with that feeling of in the string, even though we're going to come off. Now, I always make this little joke. You know this piece, right? Here it is. Violinists think this goes a different way, but it doesn't. This is the way it goes, right? This is our Mozart stroke that we're going to use virtually forever. So here again, I like a fingered note rather than an open. It responds just a little bit more firmly than the open string does. So I like to start on a ringing fingered note. We'll begin with this. When we've got this going properly and our weight and everything is set and our hand is soft and bouncing, we add the back and forth motion. the speed that the speed that the spiccato goes is entirely dependent upon how far you drop it. Okay, if you drop it a long way, it's a slow one, and the smaller you drop, the quicker the tempo becomes. It's exactly the same motion, it's just a smaller distance. Okay? So, for your information, I make a big point out of this particular bow stroke in Book 4 in the second movement of the Breval Sonata. So we're starting our true spiccato there. So at this point in time, I'm going to shift gears and talk about something else. To summarize, down in the string, stay there. Get a deep tone. Start and stop with precision. Refinements happen and it branches to the various needs in the future. Okay? Detache. Detache is the English, the most obvious English, translation of that is detached. Turns out that's not true. I was fooled by that when I was a kid. I'm sorry, I was going to try to make a photocopy and enlarge this, but let me see if I can show you what my music dictionary has under Detache. Can you see item 4 there? Item 4, which is 16th notes with tenuto lines over them. Not dots, not separated, tenuto lines. The reason that it's called Detache is because Detache is always separate bow strokes, and whatever small articulation happens comes from the changing of the bow. If you do slurs, suddenly it becomes legato. Okay? So Detache is this. Once again, down deep, stay there, and move back and forth as smoothly as you can do it, like this. Here we go. Ready? Go. You will notice, I mean, it's very hard to describe these in words. Here's the way I call it. I say, Detache is moving back and forth in small notes in separate bows as smoothly as possible. Hence the tenuto lines in the example. The dictionary brings in a little moment of articulation, which I find confusing. I don't want people to hear it, to attempt to make a stop, but you're going to get a little articulation because of the bow change, right? So my intention as I am making it down deep, as smoothly as possible. Good. Now, we have this in a twinkle as well. Okay, let me give people a chance. I see people writing, and I'm very happy about that. And don't forget kind of to play out toward the balance point of the bow. Don't get too close to the frog. This will be a place where the tone will be, this is hard this is really important down here, but it's hard to play back and forth that small and keep it from being harsh. This will be a little bit easier to do, okay? So here we go, get your weight deep. Let's play one line of this Twinkle Variation. Yeah, sink, sink, relax, relax, bird wings, bird wings. Think about your shoulder, think about the water pouring into the string and going down. Ready, go. The thing about this, again, is with my littlest kids, with the twinkle bow, I'm completely happy to have them use their entire bow arm motion in this. At this moment, all I'm interested in is getting the weight in and keeping it there. We will refine it next, okay? But right now, that's what we do with the most beginning people. The next place is the double variation of perpetual motion, this one here. Now, this is the first time where I explicitly start to talk about moving the forearm for the stroke, okay? And here's where your steering is going to come in. You're going to steer from here and go that way. Okay? Everything else is the same. Get your weight set, nice and deep. Keep it in there, but move from here and not from here. All right, let's just do these first. Listen. Your turn, go now. Good. So anything, I'm not talking about fingers in any of this. There are going to be times for fingers. If the fingers are soft, they will move naturally. So I don't let my students do funny things with their fingers in this. We're entirely thinking about weight and steering from here. So listen, this is the piece. So let's play a line of that together. Those of you who know the song, put this down deep, be at the balance point, steer out from your behind your wrist. Ready, go. Okay, now, basically what this is your Baroque fast movement bow stroke. Almost, well, I always hate to say the word all, but I really don't know an exception to this. Almost all quick movements in Baroque sonatas have two bow strokes in them. They have martelé and they have détaché. Détaché being the smooth ones, détaché being the little ones that we're working on right now. They have the melodic character and allow you to create shapes and phrases. Martelé, which we will talk about next, is got the energetic character to it. And this is the way my teacher put it to me way back when, Miss Schoenfeld. The notes with the smaller value have the longer, smoother articulation. The notes with the longer value have the more articulated, stopped, separated articulation. And it's a rule of thumb that basically, I don't know of any exceptions to that in a fast movement of a Baroque sonata. So that means that we can do certain things like this. If I'm doing Handel Bourrée in Book 2, thinking about it as being a long phrase with a smooth character, only with separate bows. And that's our Baroque bow stroke. This also takes a branch now in Book 3 with Webster Scherzo. The thing about Webster Scherzo, I start to do exactly the same point, but I turn this more into a rebound. Instead of controlling both directions, I go where you let the bow go out and it comes back automatically. A rebound is what I call it. Rebound, rebound, rebound. Okay? So If we've got our weight down deep in the string, then the tone remains, the tone works, okay? So let's just do this, rebound, rebound, rebound. Do it in a row like this. Ready, go. Ready, go, rebound. Okay? So this piece. Okay? Now, I've just looked at my clock. I need to move forward, so I'm going to try and hurry now. What begins to happen in the next iteration of the rebound is that you make your bow very, 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 very heavy and very, 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 very sticky. Ready? Go. You'll notice it's the same motion. It's the same motion. You're using your forearm, you're steering from here. It's very, very deep and very, very sticky. Now, where this ends up is sautier. Okay? Now, sautier means to jump. It's sort of like when you saute your vegetables and they jump in the pan, right? Okay? Sautier means to jump. The idea is, and I want to make this distinction, sautier appears to be a bouncing bow stroke, but it's not the same as spiccato. With spiccato, the bow hair actually leaves the string and you control every one of the motions in your hand. Sautier, the bow hair never leaves the string. And you let it be more of the rebound action. And what happens is the bow takes over for you and does the springing for you. It begins to sound like a bounce, even though the bow hair is not leaving the string. Which is what we can do with Webster Scherzo later, is come back to it and revise that bowing and turn it into a true sautier. So there are some places like Revol Sonata second movement again. The loud ones, I ask my students to use as much bow as possible. Because it's fast, it's only about this much bow. And on the soft ones, because there are actually dots on some of them in the book, I ask them to use as little bow as they possibly can. And you get stuff like this. Get that. Sorry, I blew that one. But you get a little bouncy sound on the soft ones. Goldtremont Concerto. Little tiny, suddenly sounds bouncy, but it's not really a bounce. And then, of course, the traditional sort of sautier bow strokes in like Wenger and Scherzo. It's that same action. It's that same thing. Put your weight deep in the string and stay there. Do a little rebound thing in your hand and let the bow do the springy work for you, which is, again, why we got to start way back when, making sure the bow hand is soft. You're squeezing, you can't do sautier, right? Because the bow hand has got to have its natural shock absorber thing going on for you, or you don't get the ring. Last movement, Haydn Concerto, filled with this kind of bow stroke. All right. Let me hit martelé. It won't take very long. And then we'll talk about legato, which will take even less long. Martelé I define as long bows with stops, okay? Staccato is little bows with stops. Martelé is long bows with stops. Martelé, therefore has got a faster bow speed. Martelé, therefore, creates a different musical energy. So this. Ready? Try it. Still concentrating on being deep in the string. Go. Stay deep in the string. Go. All right, now we actually have this in Suzuki in Twinkle theme. And for your information, this is the place where I will give the kids a longer bow and not have them use their twinkle bow on this bow stroke, because I want them to use more bow. Allegro in Suzuki book. So there's lots of opportunities for us to do martelé depending on the musical need of the piece. But let me just jump to, let's say, the Vivaldi Sonata in Book 5, which begins with Detache and a melodic character. Then becomes martelé. And so on, okay? Back and forth between Detache and martelé. Okay. Legato then is simply playing as smoothly as you can. Now, this then is where in the Suzuki book we do French folk song. Long bows and no stops. That's the warm-up I use for French folk song. Ready? Let's try it. 1, 2, 3, 4. This again is a tonalization idea. There are times I go through phases. I don't do, you can't do everything every day, every lesson forever. You need to give some variety and rotate through things. But at certain points in time, all of my students at all levels begin on an open G at their lesson. There is so much to deal with on this. Let me mention a few of the key points. 1, as you go to the upper half, do not let your first finger press. Don't let your elbow twist, okay? Now, let's face it, here's a nice point of balance with my arm at the frog. You can't do that out here. You have to go a little bit this way just to direct the weight to the right place. But note the shoulder does not come up. Notice the arm does not twist. So there's a little swing in here. There's a swing. When I was teaching myself how to do this as an adult, because nobody taught me how to do this, I did a thing, and I now call it touching base. And it's after baseball, which a lot of American kids know about. American kids, if you'd miss the base, you're out, okay? Got to touch the base. And touching base means right at the frog, right at the frog. If your arm's in the right place, your forearm's going to touch the side of the cello. Now, I don't want them to get here and try to do something weird like that. It's a natural thing that should occur. If my arm is in the correct spot, I go out. have to swing out, paying attention to how the contact point feels here. And touch base. And if I can teach that on Open G, well, then I've got it, right? For like every piece ever, you need to create a beautiful sound on without pressing, without squeezing, without, harshness, with resonance. You need to stay loose and balanced. The way it comes from your back, it sinks into the string, and your arm controls the contact point. Okay? Now, honestly, in absolute truth, that just goes like everywhere. You've got all kinds of legato pieces to study. And in Suzuki, there's so many, I can't even name them all. But Judas Maccabeus is one, Berceuse is one. There are many, many, many great, beautiful, smooth pieces that we can work on. And therefore, I'm kind of done talking about legato. Now, let me summarize the entire session, and then we'll have questions and we'll be done. I do feel this, I might have said this before, but I'm going to say it again now. We teach these 4 bow strokes in Suzuki Book 1: staccato, detache, martelé, legato. And these 4 bow strokes evolve into the future in terms of the needs of the repertoire and the music to become all the other bow strokes that we really must have in order to be successful advanced players. There are exceptions. There are strange bow strokes like ricochet, which I'm not including in this. But if you've got a good soft bow hand and a bow that will allow your bow to spring, stuff like ricochet is not that hard to control. So I'm leaving out some of the more esoteric bow strokes, but for the most part, staccato, detache, martelé, legato evolves to cover what we need. All right, so who's got a question?
Hi, I don't have my bow because we're out of town, but I have a lot of problems with, I also go into schools and just help out the orchestra teachers, and bow holds is probably their #1 problem that they have, because a lot of them are violin teachers trying to teach bow holds. And so how would you help a lot of them like lift their pinkies up? And we'll try and hold their bows and have their pinkies lifted. Would you be concerned about that? How would you help with students?
Lifting up the fingers, excuse me, is not a bad thing to do as an exercise. One of the things you can do is put the bow just stationary on a string and one by one lift and tap each finger. Okay, just to be sure that they're movable. I don't think I want them to lift it up while they're actually playing. Here, okay, I'm going to tell you another thing when it comes to things like colle, this action. This was very, very hard. It's a very frustrating thing because typically what happens is people do it 3 times and their hand slips and they lose it. Okay, the way I finally figured out how to do that was I imagined the middle of my hand actually holding the bow. The responsibility for holding the bow is here, and these guys are mostly there for steering. Now, there are going to be debates among professionals about whether we really think about this or this in terms of how we play the bow and the technique. But for me, That helped a lot. Feel this here as the main bow hold and have these guys be really soft. Now, I also don't teach this. Some people do, I know. The bow on top, the little finger on top, and I don't do that. And the reason is, I think, especially for students, you put it on top, the first thing you do is press, and it locks it up. Okay, so again, I don't want to make the little finger responsible for supporting the tip of the bow. I would like that all to happen in here and let the little finger be there for refinement and for steering. Any motion games you can think of, do it. Make sure that the fingers are movable. There was a guy on the Internet Cello Society who was teaching bow holds, and he didn't do a complete job of it, but he made a little joke about his very expensive bow that he went out and got. Okay, and the idea is here again, like the twinkle bow, you're doing something that doesn't demand a lot of weight support. You just put your hand in the right place and hold it softly. This kind of daily exercise can also be helpful, I think. Once again, the biggest challenge is to help the kids acquire the feelings you're trying to describe. And if they can acquire that feeling and sort of recognize it and make it happen in one context, then you can make the context a little more complicated. I would also say that if you're in school orchestra situations, you might see if there are smaller bows around for them to use. I've even had, in the past, before I had twinkle bows available to me, I've even had my kids use little violin bows, because the violin bows at the tip are very much lighter than the cello bows at the tip. And the whole idea is to make it as easy as possible to hold and control the bow, so you don't have to feel like you got to grip it in a death grip. So does that help? Does that give you some ideas?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Anybody else? Yes.
Unmute. Okay, I just put it in the chat, but basically I have to read it. My first teacher had me down into the string playing all kinds of short bow strokes, and I ended up with a double hit upon initiating the bow stroke and choked my tone overall. My current teacher is attempting to fix that by getting me to lighten up but play closer to the bridge, which has helped, although I've started having issues with it again of late.
Okay.
And I do have a really tight hold.
I was just going to say, I would say that might be the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like the very first thing I was showing you with the staccato, if you get down in, and it actually can be very heavy, but if you're really relaxed, it still rings at the end. If we start to squeeze and or press, it becomes, and you hear the scratch.
Yeah.
So I would suggest the most important thing to do would be to soften. I was watching you a little bit. Soften up your bow hand, and you know what you could do too is you could pull your wrist back this way a little bit.
Okay.
Your wrist is mighty high when you play. Okay.
Okay.
And I had to get over this myself, because the theory is the higher wrist is better than the lower wrist, but I'm saying no. Both extremes are bad. Okay, the extreme of this and the extreme of this, the bottom line is it won't move.
Okay.
But what you need is to pull backwards and let this be a little bit more less bent and more just curved, and it will have a more easy movable point of it.
I also have I have a 3/4 cello.
Yeah.
But a full-size bow.
You might practice with a 3/4 bow. As I was just saying, part of the deal is to acquire the feeling. And if you can acquire the feeling with a smaller, lighter bow, then you'll have it. It'll be in there and you can apply it then.
Yeah, I got my first cello was a full size, and they gave me a 3/4 bow, and then I got my 3/4, and they gave me a full size bow. It was,
I can't tell, of course, on the internet, but I believe your arms are long enough to handle a full-size bow.
yeah,
And therefore, I'm not suggesting you should switch permanently to a 3/4 size bow, but as a practice thing,
uh-huh.
that might be helpful.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
This little discussion brought up something to me, which I thought I'd share with you. We tend to say, and I still tend to say, you tilt the bow stick toward you. You tilt the bow stick toward you when you play. Now, the interesting thing about that, and I do explain it to my students, even though tilting the stick is a convenient way to use words, it's not tilted. It's an optical illusion. The cello is tilted. The bow hairs are facing the floor, absolutely flat. And if you bring that back into the cello, you're not playing on flat hair. Okay? You just start out here with the bow hair facing the floor, you bring it back, and the stick is tilted toward you. And notice what it does for my wrist. Okay? So I'm not advocating flat hair. I think flat hair it has a place and a use, but I don't teach flat hair. I teach this tilt. And Ms. Schoenfeld said, well, you know what else happens? The more weight you put into the bow, the hair actually spreads out and becomes flat hair, even when the bow stick is tilted. Okay, so let's try to get away from this. Think about that approach, and that ought to give you just a little more movability. Yeah, that's right. The idea being, if you start in a situation where it won't move no matter what you do, well, you're kind of out of luck. But if you start in a place which allows your body to move in a natural fashion, then you've got the opportunity to try and deal with these issues. Okay, something else. All right, so look, I don't, is Scarlett within, there she is. Scarlett, I think at this point, we're probably done.
Okay.
I hope that if any of you do have questions or follow-up things that you want to discuss, that you will be in touch with Scarlett. And if we can collect things and or just have a free-for-all question and answer kind of thing, though it helps me to know the topics in advance. We can meet in the new year again. It just depends. But I do appreciate having you be here, and I do appreciate having the opportunity to share these ideas. And if you can do this for yourself, and if you can do this for your students, you're setting them up right at the beginning in order to be successful in the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Rick. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, I see many thanks in the chat. You will read them afterwards, I think. People are also saying happy holidays. So yes, I guess we are moving to Christmas already.
That's right. Coming up soon.
Yes. Well, maybe we will meet next year. It depends on the questions that will be asked.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you for being here.